The Copa room at the Sands Hotel buzzed with electric anticipation on the night of March 18th, 1960. The air was thick with cigar smoke and expensive perfume, the kind that only Vegas royalty could afford. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm amber glow over 2,000 faces. Hollywood stars, high rollers, politicians with secrets, and businessmen whose real business was never discussed in daylight. Tuxedos were sharp. Champagne flowed like water. The Rat Pack was performing tonight, and in 1960, that meant you were witnessing history. Dean Martin stood center stage in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his tie loose in that effortlessly cool way only he could pull off. He was mid-song, crooning, "That's Amore," with that velvet voice that made women weak and men wish they had half his charm. The microphone seemed like an extension of his hand, the spotlight his natural habitat. To the audience, Dean Martin was the king of cool, relaxed, confident, untouchable. But beneath that polished exterior was a different man. Dean Paul Crocetti, the son of an Italian immigrant barber from Steubenville, Ohio, who'd watched his mother die too young and carried her teachings like a second heartbeat. Every night Dean stepped on that stage, a small voice in his head whispered that he didn't belong there, that any moment they'd discover he was just a working-class kid playing dress-up. The Jerry Lewis split 2 years earlier had left scars that the public never saw, wounds of rejection that made Dean question everything about himself. But tonight, none of that showed. Tonight, Dean was magic. Sammy Davis Jr. stood in the wings, watching his friend own the stage. Sammy had just finished his own performance, and the crowd had loved him, though some of the applause felt thinner than usual. Sammy knew why. 3 weeks ago, he'd done the unthinkable in 1960 America. He'd gotten engaged to May Britt, a white Swedish actress. The newspapers had exploded, the hate mail had poured in, and now the threats had started coming from sources that didn't just write angry letters. Frank Sinatra paced nervously backstage, smoking a cigarette with sharp, agitated movements. He'd gotten the call 2 hours ago. Chicago was sending someone. Tonight, everything was going well. The show was flawless, the audience mesmerized, the Rat Pack brotherhood on full display. This was Vegas at its absolute best, glamour, talent, and danger, all swirling together in the desert heat. Dean took his final bow to thunderous applause, blew a kiss to the ladies in the front row, and walked off stage with that signature relaxed stride that made everything look easy. This was Dean Martin at his absolute best. The cool, the charm, the effortless talent that made him a legend. But what you're about to witness isn't about the performance. It's about the man behind the microphone. The man who valued brotherhood over safety, principle over survival. If you've ever wondered what real courage looks like when your life is actually on the line, stay with this story. Drop a like if you're ready to see Dean Martin face down the Chicago outfit. Because in 30 seconds, someone was going to walk into that dressing room and test him in a way he'd never been tested before. Vincent, Vinny the Knife. Marcello entered the backstage area like he owned it, which, in a sense, he did. The Sands Hotel, like most of Vegas, operated with the Chicago outfit's blessing. Vinny was 6'3", 240 pounds of muscle gone slightly to fat, with dead eyes that had seen too many bodies and felt nothing. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's cars, diamond cufflinks that caught the light, and a smile that never reached those cold, calculating eyes. 4 men followed him, silent, professional, the kind of men who didn't need to speak to communicate threat. Dean had noticed them the moment they walked past security, guards who suddenly found the floor very interesting. Frank's face had gone pale. Sammy had frozen mid-conversation with a stagehand. Vinny walked straight to the Rat Pack's shared dressing room and opened the door without knocking. Dean was at the mirror, removing his stage makeup with cold cream. Frank was pouring scotch with hands that shook slightly. Sammy stood in the corner, suddenly very aware of how small he was compared to these men. "Gentlemen," Vinny said, his Chicago accent thick and deliberate. "Beautiful show tonight. Really beautiful. Sammy, you got pipes that could make a stone cry." "Thank you," Sammy said quietly, his usual confidence evaporated. Vinny's smile disappeared. "Which is why it's a real shame you're gonna have to cancel the rest of the run." The room went silent. The ventilation system hummed. Someone laughed distantly in the hallway. But inside that dressing room, the air had turned to ice. Frank stepped forward, jaw clenched. "Vinny, we have a contract." "I don't give a fuck about your contract, Francis." Vinny's voice was casual, almost friendly. "I'm here with a message from Chicago. Certain people are very upset about Sammy's life choices. Marrying a white woman? That's bad for business. Makes people uncomfortable. Creates problems we don't need." Dean had stopped cleaning his face. He watched Vinny in the mirror, saying nothing. Sammy's voice was barely a whisper. "May and I love each other." "Love." Vinny laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Kid, I don't care if you're fucking Romeo and Juliet. The people I work for want you off this stage. They want you to break off that engagement. They want you to disappear for a while until people forget. And they want it done quietly." He walked closer to Sammy, towering over him. "Because if it's not done quietly, accidents happen. Stage lights fall. Cars lose their brakes. You understand what I'm saying, Sammy? I'd hate for something to happen to such a talented performer." Dean stood up slowly. He wasn't a big man, 5'10", 170 pounds, but something in his movement made Vinny's men shift slightly. Frank moved to Dean's side. The brotherhood was forming, a silent wall. "Vinny," Dean said, his voice calm and measured. "Sammy's not canceling anything." Vinny turned, genuinely surprised. "I'm sorry. What?" "You heard me." Dean walked closer, hands relaxed at his sides. No aggression, no fear, just certainty. "Sammy's staying. May Britt is staying. The engagement is staying. You're going to walk out of here and tell your bosses that the Rat Pack doesn't bow to threats." The room was so quiet you could hear hearts beating. Vinny studied Dean for a long moment. "You know who I work for, Dean. You know what we can do." "I do." Dean's voice didn't waver. "And you know what? I don't care." Frank's eyes went wide. Even Sammy looked shocked. Dean continued, his words precise and deliberate. "My mother taught me something before she died. She said, 'Dino, real strength isn't how hard you can hit. It's being kind when you could be cruel. It's standing up when it's easier to sit down.' Sammy is my brother, not my friend, my brother. And nobody threatens my brother and walks away thinking, 'I'll let it happen.'" Vinny's face darkened. "You're making a mistake, Dean. A big one." "Maybe." Dean's eyes held Vinny's without blinking. "But it's my mistake to make. You want to hurt Sammy? You go through me first. You want to cancel our shows? You'll have to drag all three of us off that stage. And you know what'll happen if you do that? Every newspaper in America will write about how the Chicago mob shut down the Rat Pack because Sammy Davis Jr. fell in love with a white woman." He took another step closer. "That the kind of publicity your bosses want, Vinny? That the kind of heat they're looking for?" Now here's the question historians still debate. Was Dean Martin recklessly brave, or did he calculate that public humiliation was the mob's one real weakness? Was this courage or strategy, principle or chess move? Let us know what you think in the comments, because the line between bravery and calculation might be thinner than we think. Either way, Vinny Marcello had a choice to make. Vinny's jaw worked, his hands clenched and unclenched. His men looked to him for direction, waiting for the signal. One word and this dressing room would become a crime scene. But Vinny was smarter than that. Dean had called his bluff perfectly. Violence here would bring attention Chicago couldn't afford. The mob ruled Vegas through shadows and silence, not public spectacles. "You're playing a dangerous game," Vinny said finally. "I'm not playing anything." Dean's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "I'm standing up for my brother. That's all. If that's dangerous, then I guess I'm dangerous." Vinny looked at Sammy, then at Frank, then back at Dean. Something shifted in his expression. Not respect exactly, but recognition. One predator acknowledging another, even if they hunted different prey. "You got balls, Martin. Stupid balls, but balls." Vinny straightened his jacket. "This conversation isn't over." "Yes," Dean said quietly. "It is." Vinny stared at him for 5 more seconds. Then he turned and walked toward the door. His men followed, confused but obedient. At the threshold, Vinny paused without looking back. "Sammy stays on stage. But Dean, you just made enemies that don't forget." The door closed. The 3 men stood in silence for a long moment. Then Sammy's knees buckled, and Dean caught him, holding his brother as he shook with relief and delayed fear. Frank poured 3 glasses of scotch with trembling hands. "Jesus Christ, Dean. Do you have any idea what you just did?" "Yeah." Dean held Sammy tighter. "I protected my family." That night's second show was electric. Word had spread backstage about what happened, and every performer, every stagehand, every person who worked the sands watched the Rat Pack with new eyes. When Dean brought Sammy out for their duet, he put his arm around Sammy's shoulders and held him there for the entire song. A message, a statement, a line drawn in the sand. The audience didn't know what they were witnessing, but they felt it. Something profound happening beneath the jokes and the music and the charm. Years later, in 1990, 5 years before Dean's death, an old man visited him at his Beverly Hills home. Vincent Marcello, now 78 and dying of cancer, asked to see Dean alone. They sat in Dean's study, 2 old men who'd lived full lives on opposite sides of a moral line. "I never came back for you," Vinny said. "You know why?" Dean poured them both wine. "Tell me." "Because that night, watching you stand up to me, it reminded me of my father, before the life broke him. He used to say, 'Real men protect people, they don't threaten them.'" Vinny's eyes were wet. "I went back to Chicago and told them the Rat Pack was untouchable. Said anyone who went after you would answer to me personally." Dean was quiet for a long moment. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I'm dying, and I want you to know what you did that night. It didn't just save Sammy. It saved something in me I thought was dead." Vinny stood to leave, then paused. "Your mother was right. Real strength is being kind when you could be cruel. But stories like this one, the moments when Dean stood up for dignity when it could have cost him everything, those are the stories that keep his legacy alive. If this moved you, hit that like button and subscribe, because there are dozens more untold Dean Martin stories that deserve to be remembered. And this legacy? It lives on in everyone who chooses brotherhood over safety, principle over survival. When Dean Martin died on Christmas Day 1995, his daughter found a small leather notebook in his belongings. Inside, in his mother's handwriting, were the words he'd carried for 60 years. "Dino, real strength is being kind when you could be cruel. Stand up when others sit down. That's what it means to be a man." That wasn't just Dean's legacy. That's a challenge for all of us.